Good evening, folks. Triple Crown here, coming to you from Vancouver, British Columbia. This is a round 7 summary of the Global War 1939 series. Here we go. Just want to talk about something that may be a little bit different from other variants of other World War II board games you play, and that is the naval base. So the naval base in Global War 1939 is not land specific, covering multiple sea zones. In some variants, you can put your naval base on South Africa, for example, and it would cover both of these sea zones. Well, in Global War 1939, the rule for a naval base is you need to have one in each sea zone. So on the map, if you look up here in South Africa, Cairo, there's also a naval base on the north and south side of Cairo. Now, a mistake that I had made in playing is, you can see here, east of Italy, it's kind of hard to see with all this stuff in the way, is there is no naval base east of Italy, and that's where I was building my navy. And which meant, if you build navy here, it can only go 2 spaces, and it never would have been able to take Cairo. Now, and for gameplay, it made actually no difference where I placed it. I just decided to place it there, but there is a naval base, as you can see here, on the west side of Italy. So, little mistake there. Hilltop didn't punish me or say, hey, we're going to need to take this attack back. Well, it was a few rounds after the fact, but also when the Allies did their landing over here in France, they landed in Normandy. And if you look in Normandy, there is no naval base in the sea zone here, which meant the American transports cannot make it back to South or North America in 2 spaces. So I don't know if Hilltop should have done this, but if you had taken Bordeaux, you can see there's a naval base here, and the Americans, can use that naval base on their subsequent turn and go back to North America in 3 spaces. So just because I had moved all America's naval transports back and was stacking up here, this massive stack, I decided to just swap everything, Normandy and Bordeaux, to not punish the Americans for landing in Normandy and not having access to the naval base, because they can attack and land in Normandy, but they cannot make it back to North America. So the better landing spot, that is something I just learned, if you're bringing the Americans in, is Bordeaux, because you have access to the naval base. Now, you could build one, but you're still 2 turns away from using it. So the best plan of attack is definitely Bordeaux. So just to point that out, that sometimes when you get all your pieces on the board and you just sometimes assume things. Like I assumed this over here on Italy and Hilltop. I'm not sure if you actually thought that. I haven't asked them, but just to point that out. And let's get into what's happening this round. There is skirmishes happening all over the map. So from southern Iran, the British came in and took out the Japanese, sitting here in Bombay. I think that's, Bombay. And the Italians came in, and then the Russians found a new purpose. The Russians came down to the northern border of India and southern border of Russia, and they are prepared to come into India to try and liberate Calcutta. And you can see when the British came in, they killed about 4 Japanese ground units. So there's only currently 2 Japanese infantry defending Calcutta from this Russian army that's coming down with 4 infantry, 5 armor, and 3 Katyusha rocket launchers. That's an air transport and 2 tactical bombers. So that is a pretty sizable force. And to help them out, the KMT that were sitting in Szechuan took a poke at these Japanese here, and they killed another 2 of them. They lost a couple of their own, but that's a trade-off they're willing to make, because these Japanese infantry are making their way to defend Calcutta, and the Japanese don't have any naval transports in range. So that is a problem. So Calcutta is definitely now under threat. And because the Italians decided to go into the Middle East and do a bunch of other stuff. Cairo is also now, there's one lone infantry defending and a Kara Amato armor just south in Upper Egypt. So what are the Italians going to do here? As these, they don't have any navy left, but they do have a couple fast movers down here and a bunch of infantry that are slowly creeping up. So are the South African the nation that could, making 3 IPP to start the game? Are they going to be able to liberate Cairo? And why this is possibly in play is because the Allies debated, they thought long and hard. They could have probably taken Paris this turn. In fact, the Americans easily probably could have followed up after the British if they were unsuccessful. However, they would not have much of a follow-up if they also wanted to take Italy. And the fact that they're also threatening Paris and Italy right now is making, everybody that's defending Europe very nervous. The Germans are still defending Western Germany, which they should, and definitely Northern Italy. Or currently, there's a bunch of blockers here. There's about 25 Italian ground units in Marseille, which next turn, if the British decide to go in, they now have some armor on the mainland of Western Europe. They've got 5 tanks and about 6 or 7 artillery and about maybe 20 infantry. So they can definitely clear that out and have the Americans come in behind them. And as soon as they're in Marseille, they could still head up to Reims, they could still hit Paris, and they could still head to Italy. So that might be the play that they do. And we'll see. The Germans, however, are reinforcing Paris every turn with their armor trains. They're dropping off another 6 units and building 3. So they also drove another 3 armor down. So Paris is pretty heavily defended, so it's not going to be an easy battle. Up here in Norway, there's still the 8 British defending. However, this tank is upside down. The Germans have re-diverted a bunch of their panzers and their infantry up, so there's going to be a battle upcoming in Norway. The Germans did build a couple submarines and a couple heavy bombers. This is the German stack that's too big to count right now, sitting in Western Germany. The Germans continue to clean up the eastern territories east of Moscow, and the Russian stack of infantry is just being pushed. They can actually leave this territory here and loop around and survive to fight another day. Over here in South America, everyone's just kind of standing still. No one's really doing anything. So we'll see what happens next turn. Just a bunch of infantry, so everybody's better attacking than defending. Now, the Japanese have a couple transports here that are loaded. Are they going to go back and hit Cairo? Because it looks like now that Sydney is pretty well defended. A big stack of infantry there, a fortification, a bunch of tanks. And they have moved their navy down here off of New Zealand, and they built a destroyer last turn. The Japanese are still getting beat up along the coast here. This is just a never-ending battle. They did kill a couple of the CCP units. But now it looks like the KMT are sort of putting their 2 stacks together. So we'll see what happens there. The Japanese were successful in taking Hawaii last turn, and they survived with about 6 or 7 ground units, or maybe a few more. That's going to be a problem for the Americans, taking it back, depending on how the Japanese try to defend it. And the Americans decided to split their economy last turn, and they spent half in the east and half in the Pacific, because they currently have a small advantage now over the Japanese, but the Japanese are going to reinforce next turn with this aircraft carrier, a couple destroyers, and a couple Zero fighters, which are going to be able to land. So the battle over here of attrition for naval superiority continues, and over on the East Coast, the Americans did build. They're finally building armor. They built 5 armor and another 5 infantry, and the Canadians also built an armor and an infantry. And on the west coast, the Canadians also built an armor, and they have an infantry and a sub there defending British Columbia and Vancouver. So that's the end of round 7, folks. Stay tuned for round 8.